Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. So here it is, the buggy that everyone's talking about right now, possibly one of the biggest buggy releases for years, perhaps even decades in some ways, and that's not an exaggeration. This of course is the team associated RC10B7, a buggy which has got a lot of new designs within it that we haven't seen in a buggy before, and something that I'm going to take a much closer look at later in the week when I've completed the build. But to kick things off, I just wanted to go through and do a quick unboxing so you get an idea of what you get in the box of this 1/10 scale competition buggy. Okay, so let's start off with a quick look around the box. This is a box dedicated to the B7, unlike some other manufacturers that just have a generic box with all the details of the new features on the B7. For example, the 5-gear transmission, the long arm suspension, and the KPI, that's kingpin inclination, adjustable steering and caster blocks. So some fairly significant departures from previous or recent buggy designs. Made in Taiwan, for those that are curious. As you probably know if you've been in the hobby for a while, Associated is actually owned by the Thunder Tiger Corporation, who are a Taiwanese company. More details on the back here of what you get in the box. That's enough of the outside. Let's get out the knife, cut through these seals and get into the box. So pretty well filled, as you'd expect, and each bag is labelled here. I'm not going to actually break down the bags. I'm going to do a more detailed look at the parts later on. So again, first bag, bag 6 here. Lots of plastic moulded parts, including the new transmission housing. You might just be able to pick out that there's holes there for a total of 5 gears inside the transmission. That's 3 idler gears along here to move the motor forward. Also, as you expect, there's some slipper clutch and gears there for the spur gear, the top half of the rear gearbox, a few aluminium parts, wing mounts and the like. Here we've got bag 2, another big bag of moulded parts mostly. We've got the moulded side rails there for the chassis. We have got the front suspension arms. These are longer in the B7 compared to the previous generations of associated buggies. In fact, these front suspension arms, it's the first time they've been longer than the original B4, which is nearly 20 years old. So it's quite a big change for Associated to come out with these parts, and perhaps a bit of a risk as well. Looks like there are some other plastic parts here. This is the nose cap and parts of the front shock tower. The carbon shock tower there, a moulded servo brace, and also as well, just peeking through there through about 3 layers of plastic, is the aluminium front arm mount. Again, this is much narrower than on the previous generation of buggy to allow these long arms to be fitted without obviously making the whole buggy far too wide. Okay, bag 5 looks like the gear diff. Again, Associated have made another change on the gear diff. This uses the alternative gears inside it that were initially launched on the B74.2, I think, which have a slightly different profile on the teeth, which should hopefully give a improved gear diff action. So that's another change that Associated have made for this generation of buggy. Bag 4. Looks like we've got the rear suspension arms. Again, the rear suspension arms are longer than before, with a few different mounting points there. Also, the pills, which is standard these days for adjusting toe-in and anti-squat on the rear suspension, and an aluminium arm mount. And again, you can probably even tell just by looking at it just how much narrower that is than previous generations of Associated buggy. Again, to make sure you don't go too wide with the longer arms, you've got to bring the arms close together near the gearbox. Okay, here we have bag 1. The bearings, again, Associated supplying their kind of hybrid bearing, which has got a steel shield on one side and a rubber shield on the other side. Gives you, in theory, the best of both worlds. The rubber shield should go outwards facing the elements, and the steel shield just gives you a little bit less drag, so the bearing operates more efficiently. There is a front anti-roll bar. This of course is the standard B7, which is sold as a carpet spec car, so anti-roll bars would be your typical setup. Also got some more parts here. This is the front inner mount for the upper links, some servo horns there as well, and more hardware for the anti-roll bars, I think. Bag 10 here looks like the battery cradle. So Associated for a long time on the B6 ran this quite large battery plate that you would screw down with thumb screws over the battery. It was a bit of a faff, to be honest. It had a degree of flexibility in position, but it wasn't that easy to work with, and they've revised that for this one. They've just gone for the much lower profile simple jaws that most of the other manufacturers have been using for a while on their buggies. Bag 8 is turnbuckles and bore ends. I believe again they've now gone up to a 3.5mm turnbuckle and different ball ends to match that as well. So that's another change for the B7. Again, this is parts that were on the B74 already. Okay, bag 7 is rear hubs. Again, you can see that there is the gap there for the insert that allows you to change the pin height on the rear hub as a roll center adjustment. Also the CVDs for the rear end. Associated continuing to use the captured CVD, where the bearing provides the restricts the pin from falling out, rather than some other manufacturers that actually have a clip over the pin. Anything else in there? And wheel hexes, parts of the rear hub, the aluminium links, and some screw-in hinge pins, I think, probably for the outside rear hinge pin. That will become clear as we go through the build. Bag 9 here is the shocks, and actually these haven't really changed. I believe there's a different spring rates for the carpet car compared to the B6.4 that went before it, but these are still the same 13mm interior bore shocks, which were launched on the B6.4 and also are on versions of the B74, so the new standard for Associated shocks. Bag 3, we have got the very interesting KPI caster hubs are here. So what Associated have done is, within the caster hub, there is, instead of having a standard kingpin going through, there's actually going to be a pillow ball that goes through there, which then bolts into the steering uprights here, and it will actually angle the axis that the steering uprights rotate around compared to vertical, which means that, I don't want to get too much detail, you should read up about it from someone that does a much better, well-prepared review about that, but basically it means that the point at which the wheel is rotating on the ground is much closer to the center of the tire itself, whereas with the current straight kingpin vertical kingpin angle, there is an offset between the center of the tire and the point at which things are rotating, and so in theory this creates less of a, what they call a scrub axis. So it will have an effect on the feel of the steering, might indeed make the steering smoother. That'll be something that will work out in practice how useful that is, but that is a key part to the B7, that KPI geometry on the front caster blocks. Bag 11 is a little bag full of fluids. 3 fluids from Associated there, 35 I guess front shocks, 30 rear shocks, and 30,000 weight for the diff, which is a little heavier than usual, but I believe that the new gears behave a little bit differently anyway, which is why they may have gone to a thicker kit setting for the diff oils. Also a bit of grease there for just lubrication as you go around. Almost at the bottom here, we have the new shell, which I have to say, I have seen a couple of the B7s already in action on track, and this new shell is a bit lower profile, very compact compared to some of the shells out there. Looks very good, very modern, very simple on track, so looking forward to getting that painted up. Obviously it will just be white, but you know, still looks good in just one colour anyway. And here is the rear wing. to partner it. Got some interesting decorations in the middle, but again, that's a fairly standard part to have with a buggy, just a wing like that. Here we have the front wings. These come as a pair, not as large as the Yokomo wing on the SO2, but again, these don't really make a huge difference. But it's good to have a pair of them there for spares. And more or less the last thing in the bottom here is one of the most important things, which is of course the chassis plate, aluminium anodized as before. And as you can see, it's so narrow at the front and the rear, so that's a big change in order to allow these long suspension arms to actually mount. Also milled out there for weight plates under the servo and under the speed controller. Not a huge amount of adjustment forward and aft for the battery, but that's because the motor is that much further forward in this generation of car anyway. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the weight distribution is like on a standard build, and that's something I plan on doing later on in a separate video where I'll go through all the dimensions of the B7 compared to the B6 series. I'll give you an idea about how much has changed. Last couple of items here, a bit of Velcro, a bit of sticky tape, a few associated stickers, and of course the manual in that final bag, and that is that. So there you go. That is the Team Associated B7, a brand new release from Associated. Been in the UK now for a few days, already been hitting tracks. I've seen lots and lots of updates from people using them. I've seen a few on the local track myself. Looking forward to getting this built up, and I'll share more with you in the near future. Hopefully you found the video interesting as ever. If you like what I'm doing on the channel, please do click on the like button or consider subscribing. As ever, thank you very much for watching.